Are they still in need of Juan Jennings, or can these two receivers replicate what he had brought to this offense?
I don't think anybody can replicate it initially, guys, because don't forget, Jennings has been in the offense for a number of years, and there's a lot of variables and a lot of things to learn in this offense. So, again, most people think, oh, well, the guy can run a little bit, he can catch, blah, 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 but there's so much more than that.
Rosters are all set. The Niners are making all kinds of maneuvers, and we get to visit with one of the preeminent voices, NFL minds, and deep dive tape watchers out there. He joins us every single week. Ladies and gentlemen, from NFL Films, it's Greg Cosell. Hi, Greg. How you doing?
Gentlemen, what's happening? Well, at least we're ready for some football. It's actually a really big college football weekend. I'm pretty excited.
It's huge. Yeah, week one. I know you're already deep diving on next year's draft, and then right after that, we've got, 8 days till an NFL game, 11 days until a 49er game.
Yep.
At the same time, the Niners are still doing all kinds of moving and shaking at the wide receiver position. So here's how I'd love to start. In Kyle Shanahan's system, we always hear that a lot is asked of wide receivers, and it's very difficult. So to your knowledge, Greg, how easy would it be for all of these new wide receivers to just jump onto the team and then produce right away?
I think the biggest issue has to do with things other than what we normally think of for wide receivers, which is, just running routes and catching the ball. Because there's so much formation variation. Splits are so important. There's multiple splits for wide receivers. That matters immensely. There's a lot of motions. So it's not just a matter of, hey, you go there and we're going to throw you the ball. So there's a lot to learn, but, they need bodies right now. I mean, that's the issue. They need bodies. And normally, look, Valdez-Scantling, who they just brought in, he's been around the league. He's a guy that can run. He can take the top off the defense. He's always struggled with his hands, which is why he's never become what I think a lot of people hoped he would become. But yet he does have moments. When you bring in someone like Sky Moore, my guess is, I think he was in the 2022 draft, if memory serves me correctly.
Yep.
My guess is that someone in the organization or a number of people, scouts, coaches, liked his tape coming out of college and decided that, if he's available, let's give him a shot. He's a smaller school kid. He's Western Michigan. I did him when he came out. I evaluated him. His measurables were good. He's 5'9" or 5'8", but he ran well. He didn't quite play like that, and I think that's reflected in what's happened to him in the league. He didn't play to his 4.41 40-yard dash time, but now he has another opportunity, and sometimes guys need another opportunity, and it works out. I guess we'll find out, just because it seems as if, based on the injuries, you would know better, guys. You're out there. It seems like these guys might have to play week one.
Yeah, a little bit of a desperado situation. Shout out the Eagles, where they're running out of able body receivers.
Yep.
Valdez-Scantling's interesting for me, Greg, because the numbers indicate he's a good run blocker. What have you seen on tape as far as him able to go out there and block in the run game as a receiver?
I'm going to be totally honest with you guys, okay? When I watch receivers, I'm not really looking at their run blocking. I'm just being honest. Even when I watch college guys coming into the league, it's funny. I had a coach who's coached in the league for years at the receiver position, and it might be different for Kyle Shanahan, but a coach told me that, we can teach a receiver how to be a good enough blocker for what we want to ask him to do in the run game. So I don't really know the answer to what Valdez-Scantling is as a run blocker. Obviously he can lift the top off the defense. He had a stretch. Was it last year when he was in New Orleans? I lose track of the years. He had a stretch in New Orleans where he, made a bunch of big plays down the stretch, which is what he's capable of doing. He's always been a guy that can run by people. And by the way, that matters even if you're not a volume receiver. And of course, don't forget, when guys come back, you don't even know if these guys are still going to be on the team. Right now, they're just looking for warm bodies.
No doubt. Greg Cosell is with us on 95.7 The Game, as he is every single week. Greg, I want to ask you about one of the other guys that got reacquired today and immediately put on the active roster, which is Russell Gage. He's been dealing with injuries the last couple of years, but the Niners will have us believe whatever he's been dealing with, he's back. So what was he 3 and 4 years ago in this league based on what you watched?
Yeah, I remember him pretty well. He was a tough good size guy, tough, competitive, physical. I mean, at his best. And again, now you get into all those other things I mentioned because we don't know, how well he knows the offense and the things of that nature. But he was a guy that I remember he worked the middle of the field effectively. And you guys know how important that is in the Kyle Shanahan offense because he's got good size, catches the ball, competitive, plays with a little bit of a swagger. I don't want to say he's Juan Jennings, but, he was sort of like that when he played, that style of receiver.
And you look at the whole Jauan Jennings situation and Russell Gage and what he can do and Marquez Valdez-Scantling and more of a take the top off the defense guy. When you look at the 49ers offense, are they still in need of Jauan Jennings, or can these two receivers that they've brought in replicate what he had brought to this offense?
I don't think anybody can replicate it initially, guys, because don't forget, Jennings has been in the offense for a number of years, and there's a lot of variables and a lot of things to learn in this offense. So, again, most people think, oh, well, the guy can run a little bit, he can catch, blah, 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 but there's so much more than that. So I think we have to be careful about assuming that guys are just going to step in. Now you get into how you want to structure your game plan, how you go about putting together your offense when you play Seattle week 1. Does this limit the things you can do? I don't know the answer to this. I'm just saying these are things that get thought of by coaches. Can they use the same amount of formation variation? Can they use the same amount of motion? We know the Niners are a heavy pre-snap movement team. Can they do all that with receivers that aren't used to playing in this offense? Because don't forget, when you do things like pre-snap movement, your quarterback has to get to the line of scrimmage with a good amount of time on the play clock because the motions take time. If a receiver doesn't understand exactly where he's supposed to be, that could add 2 or 3 or 4 seconds to before the ball snapped, and that becomes a problem. So there's a lot of other variables that come into play besides whether a guy can run a route and catch a ball.
Greg, it was after we spoke to you that the Niners went out and acquired Brian Robinson Jr. from Washington.
Yeah.
So, I'd love to hear what your spin is on his fit in this offense based on what you know of his talents.
It's funny. I always liked Brian Robinson going back to when he was at Alabama. He waited there. In today's day and age, it's very rare. He waited and waited and waited and got his chances last year. I liked him coming out. I knew what he was. I knew he wouldn't be a first-round pick because he's not explosive. But in the context of this offense with the one cut and the downhill element, and obviously they've expanded the run game over the years as every team has to do. But I like Brian Robinson. I think he's tough. He's physical. He's competitive. I think that if by chance McCaffrey were to get hurt, I think in the context of this offense, you can line up Brian Robinson and he can be a volume back.
And is he a back who can thrive in the two-back system that Kyle Shanahan really loves with the fullback, or is he somebody that would require them to maybe change their offensive approach to suit his running style?
No, I think he could probably fit. Again, that's an unknown, and I certainly don't know because he didn't really do that in his past in the league. But obviously he's played in a system where there's been what we would call base personnel, maybe not a fullback, but 2 tight ends. And Juszczyk is essentially kind of a combo platter. He's not a pure fullback in the sense that he's just going to line up in the backfield. He essentially moves all around the formation. So he's played in that style of offense. But, he's a sustaining type back. I wouldn't compare him traits-wise exactly to a Jordan Mason, but in some ways he'd probably be viewed as similar in what he gives you. It's that sustaining element, which obviously for the first part of last season, Jordan Mason did that for the 49ers.
Now, B-Rob, when he arrived here, Greg, said that he now thinks that he and Christian can form the best 1-2 punch backfield in the league. And obviously that's a player just kind of showing confidence in himself. But I wonder what comes to your mind when you hear that. Who do you kind of see as maybe a few of the top 1-2 punch backfields around the league right now?
Gibbs and Montgomery would be the guys that immediately come to my mind.
Sure.
I mean, again, without looking at every team in the league, I would say that comes to mind. I would say that Robinson and Algier in Atlanta would come to my mind as well. I'm sure I'm missing some because obviously we don't prepare this, so I didn't know you were going to ask me that question. But I mean, those two would come to my mind right now. I'm sure I'm missing something, and somebody when we're done are going to say, "How could you leave out this one?" But that would come to my mind right now.
Yeah, Greg, don't worry. We don't prepare either. We're just firing stuff off here to see what happens.
Hey
you know
guys,
what I mean?
you know what? I just make this stuff up as I go.
Yeah.
Believe me, I get told that a lot on Twitter, that I just make stuff up anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think we know better than that. And Greg, when you look at the wide receiver room now for the 49ers with Valdez-Scantling and taking out Juan Jennings, how much is Ricky Pearsall now maybe even more important to Brock Purdy and Kyle Shanahan, assuming that Jauan Jennings may not be ready for week 1?
Well, Pearsall's, he'd be the man now, so to speak. I mean, Pearsall and Kittle, they're there. They understand the offense. I think in an ideal world, it's not an offense that's based on we need, Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson in order to be a good passing game. I mean, in an ideal world. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that you don't want those guys. I mean, obviously, if they had those guys, it'd be wonderful. But I don't think that the way Kyle structures his offense, it's built on we better get the ball to this guy or we can't have a good pass game. Now, depending on how the season goes with Jennings, look, he's not going to sit out the season. So if he's a Niner, at some point he's going to show up because he's going to want to get paid. We'll see how it plays out. But Pearsall at the wide receiver position right now would be the number one guy.
Greg, we love that conversation about your deep dive on all of Brock Purdy's dropbacks last week. And, you certainly Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, guys, you have to think of it this way. Pretty much every quarterback in the league has defined strengths and limitations. Like if I put on Twitter that, Patrick Mahomes is not a great progression reader, which, by the way, I've been told by defensive coaches in the league, people would probably tell me I'm an idiot, but I've been told that by coaches that play against him. Okay. So now you have to think of it this way, that every coach has strengths, every coach has limitations. So what is the job, every quarterback So what is the job of a coach? You have to sort of navigate and mitigate their strengths and limitations. That's what you have to do. Okay? So Purdy has defined strengths and then he has some limitations. Now, can limitations crop up in a given game? Sure. It depends on the nature of the game, the nature of the opponent. Any given day. I mean, if we went into the Super Bowl last year and said, look what would have happened, and you said that before the game, people would have said you're an absolute idiot. Sometimes these things happen. That's the job of the coach, is to understand strengths and weaknesses and make it work accordingly.